Hello there. Welcome, NIDA students and everyone else tuning in. I'm Helen Dallimore. I'm an actress, singer, writer, director. I graduated from NIDA myself in 1995, a long time ago. And I'm very happy to be hosting this in conversation with one of Australia's most celebrated playwrights and my good friend, Tommy Murphy. Hi, Tommy.
Hello, it's nice to be with you, Helen. Thanks for doing this.
It's so nice to see your actual face. So I'm just going to launch straight in with, when did you decide that you wanted to write for the stage? Was there a moment? Was there an aha kind of, was there a show? Was there a...
Yeah, I was trying to copy, I was trying to emulate someone. There was a mentor that I found in my hometown of Queanbeyan, which is a town near Canberra. And his name was Gunnar Isaacson, and he'd been a filmmaker, most like sort of documentary and a news cameraman. And he had retired in my hometown and set up a little theatre company. And Gunnar had written a play, and I became involved in that, just volunteered to be an assistant to the stage manager. Actually, I think I was the assistant to the assistant stage manager. There was really nothing for me to do. But watching what Gunnar was doing, it was the first time a play was local and a new thing. Like plays I had thought of as something in books and from another time and from overseas. But I remember just realizing that a play is something that could be made, and I wanted to copy Gunnar. And so backstage, in between the very few jobs and cues that I had in that show, I started to write a play. But it was also about just being a part of that, you know, that activity, like putting something on. I remember a moment where they needed like a PowerPoint or something, and I just said, I can just go home and find one. And I remember that moment, standing on this road, crossing this road and holding this like extension cord and feeling like I was finally useful, like I was actually bringing something to that production. And I think that's something that I caught. I just liked the activity of it. You know?
And was that Troy's House that you started writing at that time?
No, it was a play called, not a very good title. It was a play called For God, Queen and Country. It was a play about a teenage boy in a small town coming out. I mean, it was just me coming out. Like I did come out via that play, actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But you come from, your whole family is really involved. A lot of your siblings are involved in the arts too, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, I'm one of 8 kids, and my older brothers and sisters work in the arts, and that was key to me because, like that they sort of normalised the idea of seeking a career in the arts.
And did that come from your parents as well, or was there one of the siblings led the charge?
Yeah, I think my older brother Marty, my older sister Prudence, she's a photographer. Marty was a filmmaker. I think that set. As I said, just sort of normalized it, made it just like something
good in the genes. So when did you realize? So that's the moment you wanted to do it. What was the point at which you realised that you could actually make a career out of it? Because I know for me that I wanted to be an actress since I was, little. But once I got into NIDA, that was like, oh, okay, this might actually happen for me. I might not have to do something else with my life.
Yeah, I think it was NIDA for me as well, because I did the directing course, but treated it like a playwright's course. And I think that director's course then is a really good, I mean, that's how you would structure, I think you should structure a playwright's course, like just learning everyone else's
jobs,
language, everyone else's jobs. And that was a turning point. Not only because NIDA is such an exciting environment, it's so industrious, and you catch that inventiveness and productivity of all of the people making things around you, and then all of those extraordinary guest teachers that come in. There was that moment of learning that was so important to me. But more than that, there's that personal qualification that you grant yourself. Like, I think at NIDA it was the first time that I felt comfortable describing myself as a writer, even though I had been doing it for years. So there was a sort of personal permission that was a turning point for me at NIDA.
Did you direct any of your own work when you were doing the director's course?
Not doing the director's. Oh, I did, yeah, just as a sort of an extra curriculum thing I did, but I had done that at SUDS and in youth theatre. I had directed my own things, but I really wasn't seeking to be a director. I depend on and love the dialogue between writer and director.
Tell me, what kind of writer are you? How disciplined are you? Do you set the alarm and start writing at 9 and clock off at 5, or are you a bit more like Hemingway, kind of writing into the night fueled by cocaine and scotch?
No, certainly not that. I'm at my desk right now, and there's lists everywhere. So I guess that's what the sort of writer I am. I like to scribble and strike things off. None of these have been struck off, actually. But like I like to. I guess that's my discipline. Like breaking it down into little tasks. I realized pretty quickly, like when I started to make a living off this, that. And particularly like something you have to work out with the people around you and the people you loved. I copied my partner's, I copied Dane's work hours. So I fell into a rhythm of 9 to 5, just so you can have a life around it. But that does take little it does take sometimes little rituals and little tricks to make sure that you are disciplined. At the moment, that includes things like making sure my phone is in another room, or shutting off the internet for 60 minutes or 90-minute bursts, so that I can just, sort of get into a deep work mode and then move on. I think other freelance artists probably agree, I imagine, that the hardest thing is the joins between jobs. You can get into that deep work, and then suddenly you can't control your schedule. And so suddenly there's this other job that needs you, but your brain is with that earlier task, and then you have to sever it. And then you're going to lose productivity trying to delve into that other project. I find that stuff the hardest stuff to manage.
Right. Is it a lonely profession? I mean, I know that you get into the rehearsal room at a certain point, but you spend a lot of time alone in your beautiful office there. But I just, for me as an actor, I know that I need to be with people all the time, and when I'm working, I am with people all the time. Do you ever get lonely? Do you ever feel like, or do you like to be in an office with other writers who are kind of?
I really like that.
Yeah.
I've done residencies at the STC and recently at Currency Press, and I loved that. I loved again, it's about the activity around you. Like I was saying about NIDA, you catch the productivity of other people working around you. I like that. And I think, as we were saying before we began, I think the reasons we're drawn to theatre is because we enjoy a community activity, and so if I was a novelist or something, I might like isolation, but theatre, both in the making of it and in the execution of it, is about congregation. And I think you're drawn to the theatre because you are a gregarious person or enjoy that community feeling. And that's why it's so weird at the moment to be starved of it.
Yeah, it is.
So strange.
Yeah.
I think it's really good to be doing things like this, that we're just still trying to stay in touch with each other. I think it's so important.
Sorry, I had a question. I was going to talk to you about what's happening to us at the moment, which is, this is an unprecedented time in history, and artists have been hit the hardest, or one of the professions that have been hit the hardest is artists, and certainly theatre makers, because nobody wants to sit in the theatre with 500 or 1,000 people at the moment, and we don't know when that's going to go back. How has it affected you? Have you had projects cancelled because of the pandemic?
I've had some slow down. I feel very fortunate, and I know that some of my colleagues around me haven't been as fortunate as this, but just in the rhythms of things, I didn't have anything in production at the moment. If the pandemic had hit 3 months earlier, 6 months earlier, it would have been much worse for me. And so I've been fortunate in that I've had works in development, both in theatre and and screen stuff that I've been able to remain busy doing that. But I can only imagine how heartbreaking it would be if something had been about to go into production or scheduled and then had been cancelled. And also the blow financially for those artists that have had that happen, let alone our actors. I mean, I really do feel for the actors, because when you think of, and I think it's really shines a light on the way that our industry is structured, that there is a lot of support staff in the companies, and we're really grateful for them. And a lot of them went on to JobKeeper and their jobs were preserved. But the people we put on the posters, the people that we sell the shows via, the people that have that direct relationship with our audiences, they miss out. And I think that is so unfair that the actor does have, generally speaking, have a more difficult role than, say, the writer. I can always initiate something. Not all actors can. They're responding to somebody else's impulses. And I think, therefore, in the industry, that warrants greater care for that role. And I don't think that's necessarily what's happened. I feel bad that the people who are advertising the shows, they're on the buses. They seem to be the ones thrown under the buses. And I think that's very unfortunate at the moment.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in Tech Week at the moment.
Ouch.
So,
I've
got it all written in my diary, start of rehearsals, Tech Week, opening night, opening night in Brisbane. It's kind of, I wish I hadn't written those things in now. Every time I read them, it's very sad. Yeah. So have you been inspired to write about it? Has the pandemic inspired you creatively?
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? Because I bet you there's a whole bunch of us right now trying to judge what that response should be when we're finally able to be in a theatre again, or to go into production with film. What are our audiences? What should the conversation be? And I imagine that there should be some projects that directly try to address and account for what we've been through. And then I think audience might also be craving a different experience, probably in equal measure. They're going to be wanting that escapism as well, something that is the antidote to what we've been through. But if you are going to try to write an experience of what we're going through right now, how do we know yet? We're still in the middle of it. We don't quite know we know we're in history, but we don't quite know what this chapter change is going to be yet. So it's very hard to know quite how to strike that. There's one project that I'm working on at the moment that does directly, I can't say too much about it, but it's an adaptation that does speak to a crisis of this scale. It does sort of speak, it's a story about a threat to humanity. Yep. And that's coincidental and now unavoidable that will have to resonate with the COVID experience. But I think for every writer, particularly if you're writing, realistic characters set from any time now, those characters will have an experience of this chapter change in history. So moving forward, we're all writing post-COVID plays. This is just too significant as a collective global experience.
I think we've been pretty lucky, certainly us sort of in the first world and Western world, that we haven't lived through wars that have directly affected us. We've had it pretty lucky, our generation, and I think what it's given me is a greater appreciation for the hardships of generations before us that did live through global crises and were, sending their sons and their husbands off to war, and the rationing and all that sort of stuff, which is sort of an esoteric thing that I knew happened, but now this is nothing in comparison to what those people went through. And so I think it sort of gives you an appreciation for what's happened in history, or for me anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of try to imagine how history has, how the theatre and art has responded in the past to moments of crisis like that. And it probably is divided fairly evenly between either escapism or trying to account for
Absolutely,
the loss,
yeah.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at all of the big musicals,
Like post-war musicals.
Yeah, which, I mean, that was when they really came into their own, and as people just wanted that glitz and glamour and distraction and fun, and yeah, hopefully that'll happen to musical theatre again.
And then balance it out with Waiting for Godot or something else as well. Like, yeah.
Gritty, apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me, how many of your works are commissions and how many are ideas that you bring to companies? Can you give me a kind of overview of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think always in the commissioning process, there's a conversation, like the collaboration should start very, very early. It's probably a mixture of things where I have pitched like Packer and Sons work recently at Belvoir was something that I brought to them as an impulse. Many, many years ago, it sort of went to sleep and then came back, and I think eventually kind of found its moment. But then other things like Holding the Man was something that David Berthold then at Griffin spotted as something that would be a good follow-on project for me, coming out of writing Strangers in Between for him at Griffin. So it's generally a mix, but I think what a playwright wants from artistic directors in a theatre company is sometimes to have something incited, to have, for maybe them to spot and challenge you and to trigger something that you might not have anticipated yourself. But then, just to sustain a freelance career, I am regularly pitching things. Like I'm in particular, like I think of last year, I think I was in, for both screen and theatre, I think I did about, 6 pretty detailed pitches of trying to get something up, which are pretty involved sort of pitches, and or maybe more. So I fairly regularly am in that mode of, and sometimes it's just about initiating a conversation and then a different idea emerges from it.
Yeah, right.
But I think ideally that collaboration should be very early on.
Do you ever just write something off your own volition anymore, or even though it might not have a home yet, or are you too busy? Like, I'm sure when you start out as a playwright, you're writing a play and hoping to just give it to somebody, but once you're at your stage of your career, do you ever just go, I have to get this out, I have to write this, even though I don't know?
I wish I could say yes, but more than that, there is a relationship with a company or a producer normally pretty early on. I do write things that don't come to fruition, or things that sit in a drawer for a long time. I mean, I take heart from Packer and Sons because, it sat on my shelf as this sort of, I don't know, failure. I was thinking, there's the one that never happened and won't. And I even looked at.
And there must be a bunch of them, right?
Pardon?
There must be a bunch, and there must be a bunch of them.
I'm looking up there now.
Of things that, as a writer, you must have things that you've put your heart and soul into, and at a certain point you have to let it go. But with Packer and Sons, it was such a huge success. So. Yeah,
I do take heart from Packer and Sons because Eamon Flack, the artistic director at Belvoir, had remembered, that had been in development and then, went to sleep for a whole bunch of reasons. But it, when it did come back, like, I think he really did choose the moment for it. And in a way, because of the development at Belvoir, now it's a better play because of that, but also because its moment was better. Like, it was very useful to be telling that story as the casino was being, was rising on the side of Sydney. And I think that and that James Packer had become a different figure by then. It made it a different play. It made it a tragedy, really.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And obviously it's a play about real people, some of whom are still living. And so what's your ethical stance on writing true stories? Do you feel a responsibility toward those people?
Yeah, it's a really challenging thing. I've done several true life stories now. I mean, I guess Holding the Man sits in that category, Mark Colvin's Kidney.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even sort of, there's a lot of judgment that's case by case and moment by moment in terms of, sort of not checking that you have a right to tell this story and that it is done in a way that is respectful of the real living people. But and there's a judgment call on how much they should be included in the process as well. And that's difficult in case by case. But I mean, if I think of like Holding the Man, anyone that I could meet in the research of that, I was very inclusive. Like I didn't mind them even seeing drafts and all sorts of things. And that was the right approach there, I think. It was a little bit different with Mark Colvin's Kidney. There was some sensitive material in that, but I tried to include Mark and Mary Ellen as much as possible. They didn't want to read it. They didn't want to sort of have that level of approval, but I just had to at least run the story by them. Yeah. And that was interesting because that story was making claims of this really happened, and it was about a story where the truth had been manipulated. It's about a story about someone who was a victim to lies. So truth-telling was a thematic part of that story. Yeah. So that was a particular challenge. Sorry, I cut you off, and I think you were about to say you loved the play. I don't want to cut you off.
I was about to say I loved the play, and I love what David Berthold did with that play. And the director in me was particularly thrilled with the solving of the phone calls, which for those who haven't seen it, they were all played out front without phones, almost like a monologue, but it was just because phone calls can often be really undramatic on stage and screen. So it was a brilliant solve. Was that your conceit, or did you and David come to it together?
I'm sure we worked that out together. There would have been I can't remember exactly, there would have been a solution on the page that probably was adjusted with the needs of production. David and I have worked together a lot, and sometimes when there's a risky idea, I've said something like, if it works, it's my idea. If it doesn't. But I think the other guide there is that phones were part of the subject matter. And I guess as a writer, you're always looking for those form and content guidance. And so the fact that she was a victim of phone hacking invited some playfulness with phone calls. Yeah. But the other level of that was what I was talking about before. The play is making claims of truth, but then some of it is dramatized, is fictionalized. There's bits of it that are made up. So the production had frames around it that allowed us to acknowledge that and even have fun with it sometimes. Like there would be a bit where a scene, was completely made up, and a surtitle would come up and say, "This never happened." And its relationship with the truth was part of the fun of it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was so much fun, and I kind of. It was really surprised. It was a really surprising treatment of that material.
It's a weird story.
It's a weird story, and it's a weird thing to make a play about, and it worked so well. There's an intimacy that you achieved with those phone calls that I've never seen achieved with phone calls anywhere else. Because it's just often it's just an undramatic thing. When you're talking to someone on the phone, there's a real intimacy that's very hard to capture. And when those people turned and talked to each other, you really felt the connection between them. So you're adapting that for the screen right now?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting hearing you say that. I mean, this morning I'm dealing with like trying to ask what is the screen answer to things like that. Yeah. But you're right.
Know how they started doing that thing with texts. Was it David Fincher started put in the Facebook film, whatever it's called? I can't remember what it's called.
Social Network.
Yeah, Social Network. Well, that was the first time he put the texts up on the screen, and that was really clever. Similar sort of
exciting, isn't it? Because I mean, it's exciting to try and find these like either theatrical devices or screen devices that match the way we do have intimacy despite distance.
Yeah.
Even what we're doing right now is an example of that. But
yeah.
how do you account for that? And with the story of Mark Colvin's kidney, that is very much a part of the story. Like two strangers meet via Twitter and then end up sharing an organ. So intimacy and technology and communications is all part of it. Yeah.
What stage is the screen adaptation at?
First draft.
Right. Is it? Tell me about writing for the screen. You adapted Holding the Man for the screen. Yeah. You write a lot for the screen. What do you think the differences are between writing for the stage and writing for the screen?
Do you know what I think? I think what I've worked out is that the main difference is simply the two documents are so different. A screenplay is such a different document to a stage play. With a stage play, you've got 5-6 weeks or whatever it is to interpret it, and its mysteries are exciting. It's the process of interpreting it, and then that's adjusted night by night in the theatre.
Yep.
Whereas film is this more industrial document that has to give an impression of the completed film. Like the screenplay has to read like the finished product. A screenplay is pretending to be an outcome, whereas a stage play is the blueprints to build something. I think that's the main difference for the writerly task. With a screenplay, there's just not time for rehearsals, and people are reading it who are from other departments that have to quickly understand what is necessary for hair and makeup and lighting and whatever else for this thing that we're doing right now. It's a very different document, a more immediate document like that.
I recently rewatched Holding the Man, and it struck me that it's quite different from the play. How did that screenplay evolve? Was Neil Umfield very instrumental in that?
Yeah, Neil was very much involved, and I think film is a director's medium, and I accepted that. Like I really did sort of want to write the film that Neil wanted to make, and I think we also were very keen to depart from the play. I believe that is the right choice, because Holding the Man, the play, is such a theatrical experience. Like it keeps on pointing to theatre, like that Tim Conigrave's story, it has all these turning points that are about the stage. And for that original production, it was going to be set on a stage that Tim Conigrave knew, and there was even one scene that is on that stage at the stables. And then there's parts of it that are at NIDA, it's so of the theatre that the play emphasises that theatricality and keeps on changing its theatrical modes really deliberately to help tell that story. I don't think any of those games were at all useful in the film, so it was always going to be a very different undertaking.
It's got to be so much more literal, doesn't it, in a film? I mean, you can be theatrical on film, but that wasn't that probably wasn't going to be the right way to tell that story on film.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been, but I just sort of wasn't the choice. It wasn't the way we went into it. You always, anytime you leave a project, you always speculate, like, don't you? I mean, I sort of something. I wonder what that film would have looked like, though.
Yeah.
Of course. But yeah, I mean, and I guess the other thing is that, sort of for the reasons I was talking about before, between the difference between those two documents, I think one of the challenges of screenwriting is still having room for the kind of ambiguities or poetry that we love in theatre. The great filmmakers are able to do that without the film just being literal and mechanical and those sort of things. I think they're They're the challenges.
Because you've adapted, you know, obviously 2 of your own plays, and you've written for television, which is, you know, probably stuff that's been ideas that have been brought to you. Have you written a screenplay for a film yet, just of your own volition, from your own idea, or do you have ideas for that? I know you're developing a series right now. Was that your idea?
Yeah, the series that I'm developing at the moment is that, and responding to responding to personal tragedy as well, my own experiences of grief and loss. I feel like with every project, there's a process, and actually this process is somehow more acute right now, where I think as we're all made to ask ourselves of a story, why me, you know, and why now, but particularly why me? Why do I have personal insight or expertise to tell this story? For me, a lot of the time, I think that's been about a queer lens, whether I'm directly writing about gay characters or even Packer and Sons. I mean, I don't know if other people would characterize it as this, but I think that play that I wrote could only be written that way because I'm gay, that there's an interest in masculinity, and particularly Australian masculinity, that I wanted to offer as an insight that I had from feeling like I'm both an insider and an outsider to Australian masculinity. And for Packer and Sons, I was trying to find the most stark example of brutal Australian masculinity passed down across 3 generations. But I say that just to sort of say that I'm always looking for that why me, like what do I have to offer? And I do think that question is more acute because it's very important that at the moment we are rightfully so saying who has the right to tell whose story.
It's a very fraught time in terms of that, and you know, certainly for actors too, whether a trans character must be played by a trans actor,
Yeah.
And indeed, you know, specificity of cultural background and that sort of thing. It's all coming to the fore. Yeah.
For too long, people were having their story told by other people, and that's just, you know, that's just not right. And so that takes a lot of you know, it's a very acute question to be asking at the moment, and it's on all sorts of levels, I think, as well. Like, it's always been the case that when you're writing something, you have to check both ethically why you're writing it and whether you're taking from somebody else, but also just do what personal insight is valuable. What do you think you can, because I think writing something is always sort of saying, hey, I've seen this amazing thing about life or the world, and do you think it's like this? Like, it's a sort of a question, is it like this?
Yeah.
And so with this thing I'm developing, this TV thing, it's like the personal insight is just about an experience of grief. And I feel that is the why me for that one. And then you also ask why now, and then I think you also ask why that form, why is it TV, why is it theatre, why is it film, how does it exploit and enjoy that form?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a sort of really interesting time ethically for all of us as well. You know, who's allowed to tell whose stories, and are you allowed to write about the experience that you've had with a particular kind of person if that's not your direct experience? You know, I think we're all just questioning the status quo, which is always a good
very
thing.
Important.
And it's all really late. So
yes,
I feel like when it goes too far in one direction, you think, well, that's a result of it being too late. Because if you're kept at bay for a long time, when you finally get a voice, of course you're going to want to shout it to the world, you know.
Yeah.
So do you think stylistically this project that you're developing, because this is probably the first time you're developing a screen project from nothing, from an idea,
do
you feel like your work as a playwright is making, do you feel like it's a stylistically more theatrical idea when you're not constrained by sort of the realism of other people's ideas. Is it, you know?
I would love to think that the training in theatre, that the love of theatre, you know, is something that fosters imaginative storytelling.
Yeah.
And that because of it's not the constraints of theatre, they're not even constraints, but those necessities of theatre, I think, and sometimes about the economy of theatre, there's this particular sort of inventiveness, I think, that is very, it's a wonderful part of the job, and I hope that's something that a playwright can bring to screenwriting as well. But beyond that, I mean, I think that there's also a kind of a love of camp and a love of the particular way that theatre renders human emotion that I think is also great for particularly television, because I think television is at its best with interpersonal drama, with actor-centric scenes. Yeah. I think that's something that you can certainly take from your theatre know-how and use in screen. That's not to neglect the other kind of realities of screen and the way that the way you want to tell story through pictures and all of those aspects of film that I have had now many years of trying to really apprehend. I think my early writing for screen felt like it was all written in wide shot. Just sitting in the house seats. You know?
Everyone's in like a wide shot, everyone's in a row, like a bad soap, because we're running out of time and we've only got time to shoot one size. That's funny. So the first play I saw of yours was Troy's House at ATYP I did in 1999.
Oh wow.
I did, about growing up in Canberra, which you did. Yeah. Was that wasn't the first play you wrote, because you told me just earlier about the started writing. It was the second play though?
Yeah, it was the second play. Look, I'm at my desk now. See, this is a prop. This was the garden gnome that was on stage in Troy's House. It was such a special time for me working on that play, because particularly for the group of people that helped make that play as well, and for just like it was sort of like you're writing things that you're living at that time. That play, Troy's House, is about finding as students that party household that is also where so much of your growth resides, and the sort of the relationships that forge who you are. Yeah. And sometimes they forge who you are both out of your loyalty, but also of your sort of immature neglect or mistakes with those friendships. So I feel like everything that was on stage was happening around it, and the I still have like lasting forever friendships from that time.
Yeah, I bet.
But also, sorry, go on.
No, you go on.
Well, it was just learning by doing it as well. Like it was like, you know, putting on a play there at Suds. You're doing everything. Like you're learning about what sound, what composition is, what lighting is, like even producing, like how to sell. Why aren't people showing up today? You know, or I remember then we used to get really excited when the audience was sort of filing in, and you go, "Who's that person? Does anyone know them? Oh my God, a stranger is here tonight." You know? The general public, you know.
That's so funny. When I did Wicked in London in this massive 2,000 seat theatre, and my little nephew, who was like 4 at the time, his experience of theatre was you do a school play and all your friends and your family go along, right? So he goes in to this 2,000 seat theatre in London's West End, and he says to my brother, "Are these all Auntie Helen's friends?" So cute. So cute. So do you, to that, writing from your own experience, do you believe writers and young writers or emerging writers in particular should start by writing what they know? there's the adage that that's what you should do. Is that the best place to start?
I think so, because the thing that you continually get reminded of is that your normal is exotic to others. I mean, it comes back to that thing about, it's linked to who has the right to tell whose stories, but I think mining the detail and trying to articulate a response to your experience of humanity, to your world around you, is the most honest thing that you can offer. You then find metaphors for self, like that you then write, you're not bound by just writing your autobiography. Yeah. You find, like in the way that I feel I'm connected to the story in Packer and Sons, that's about a perspective that I think you can offer, and that's a perspective on what you have researched. Yeah. There's still you in it, but there's a personal offering. I think in the same ways that when I wrote that play when I was coming out as a teenager, I think I'm always chasing that experience, because it should feel as exposing as that. It should feel as dangerous as that you're putting forward something that needs to be brave, that might seem foolish or too truthful. Yeah. And you should always have a bit of adrenaline that what you're saying is potentially going to expose something about you.
Yeah. No, and even, I suppose, as you go along in your career, as you say, you start with something that's literally about being a student, and you're a student, and then you find the metaphor that still exposes something about you, like in Packer and Sons. And I'm sure, Death of a Salesman said something about Arthur Miller and his experience of being an American male at that time. Do you like that I just compared you to Arthur Miller?
Noted. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's the last time that'll happen. That's great.
So can I just talk to you a little bit about the current rather depressing political climate, with the changes to the Federal Arts Department, increase in fees for arts, and just general lack of support for artists? What advice do you have for emerging artists who might just feel like giving up?
Well, we mustn't do that. I hope that they know that even if the government is not there for them, that there is a community within the arts that is. Yeah. I think you can really depend on that. I've felt that personally recently, having experienced tragedy. I was given a rescue by my community in the arts that I don't think other workplaces could ever give someone. I know that personally. Like, there is a support network. And also that young artists should know that they are necessary, and at this moment of uncertainty, I was going to say it will pass, but maybe you'll just learn to know that you have to be nimble and resilient, and that's part of being an artist. That uncertainty probably is part of it, but that uncertainty is destructive at the moment, and the government could be doing more. They haven't done anything to explain why the money given to the arts is capped. They haven't, when you compare it to other industries like the construction industry, that as I understand it is uncapped. As there is a need, people can apply for the grants. Now, the arts has arguably, I think definitively has been hit much harder than the construction industry because of this crisis. There's no explanation for that other than that the arts is disregarded by this government. The thing I take hope from, though, is in the conversation generally, because of this pandemic, people are talking about the arts as an industry. When you're looking at the sheer fact that our business has been shut down, I think the general public are not talking about us in terms of us being a luxury, an add-on, a bit of frill on society. We are being talked about something that is industrious, that is about workers and employment, tourism, and something that is necessary for society. I mean, I think it's broader than that. I think that what we do is nourishing for us as a people, and that's why it is so necessary. But that argument doesn't win in the political sphere. I think you do have to talk about us for our contribution to the economy. So be it. The numbers are good, and we've demonstrated how necessary and what we are as contributors. And I think that we just have to keep on fighting that fight. That has to be acknowledged.
And it will pass too. I mean, governments come in and out, and the governments that are less supportive of the arts are not going to be in power forever. And I think in a way it galvanizes artists when when you are disregarded and you feel empowered, all of those unempowered. I mean, I feel like it makes a lot of us angry, and that actually produces a lot of work. And we've got, I think those of us that have decided to make a living out of being artists have a lot of inbuilt tenacity already, because certainly you can't survive unless you're prepared to hang in there. It's a very difficult time, I think, especially we've got the pandemic, and on top of that we've got I think a government that just doesn't understand what it is that we do, and I think they think we're hobbyists.
Absolutely.
And if you're not Hugh Jackman or David Williamson, who should be fine anyway because they're rich and wealthy and living on residuals and so on, then you're a hobbyist and you probably should be doing something else anyway. That's the impression. There's no understanding for the workers, the jobbing actors, the playwrights, and the kind of the nature of the work that we do is not understood by them because they've got no experience of it. So
and maybe we all have to do a better job, like not only in how we speak, like to politicians, but even just to the people that that we pass in our daily life. Because so often you hear something like, "Oh, is that your job?" Or "How do you make a career out of that?" And maybe rather than being apologetic in our answers, we should be very direct and actually explain why it's a job, and the amount of training that goes into it, and and also the amount of voluntary work that we also do on the side. Like, the government, when it does invest in the arts, it gets very good bang for its buck, because artists are in the habit of not only, we all do it. We all do voluntary stuff, or we're doing it right now. It's I don't know. I think that reflects very well on us as an industry as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, hang in there, everybody.
I mean, I've really been during COVID, I've been doing a few of these sorts of things, like with either youth theatres or companies with emerging writer groups as well. And that is always so heartening. Just, I mean, when you speak to upcoming writers now, people, either teenagers or writers in their 20s at the beginning of their careers, that pool of writers, I think, better reflects the diversity of Australia. That's so necessary. But also talking about to all of those playwrights about what they want to make of theatre, what they believe theatre can do in today's age, I find that very, very encouraging. I think there's, when we're allowed to get back into the theatres, we should flourish.
Well, it's a time of great development, isn't it? I mean, I feel like everyone I know who writes a bit, put myself in that category, it's just a period of enforced development. I've got no acting jobs. I've got no directing jobs. I'm literally, all I can do is write. So I'm actually quite industrious at the moment.
Yes.
Hopefully something good will come out of it.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, congratulations on winning the Australia Council Theatre Award recently. You've won a lot of awards. So in an insecure industry like ours, and with the court of public opinion always in session and the disregard from government, etc., it must be gratifying to have that sort of encouragement. It must help.
It does help a lot. And that in particular, that award earlier this year came at a very good time for me. I mean, it just it does. It just gives you a boost, and it was a reminder, though, for me, like, because that award had a check attached to it, that I was being given something at a time of scarcity for others. And, just, I guess, as proof of that thing that artists give back. I personally thought it was necessary, if that was going to buy me some time, that wouldn't only be used in developing new works, but I wanted to spend more time doing, connecting with youth theatres, or Belvoir in particular. I did stuff for their emerging writers, but that it should buy me that time. because, and then of course immediately afterwards COVID then happened, and that feels even more necessary.
Yeah, good timing. Or bad timing. Now, I always say I won't read reviews, and I usually break. Do you read reviews? And if you do, how do you cope if they're
Badly.
critical? Badly.
I only remember the bad ones. Look, I try not to. I don't know what. Yeah, I try. I know how necessary criticism is. It can be really hard when the show is on to understand emotionally. So I think that it's much better maybe to wait and read them or reread them later. I've probably become a bit more hardened to them, and to, I think, understand they are subjective. At least there's a lot of them, so they can disagree with each other.
It's terrible if they're all the same.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to admit that they're right. Like, there's been reviews.
Oh, that's the worst one. That's the worst. It's fine if you can say, "Oh, what would they know?" It's just one, but if you go and actually, maybe they're right. That's awful.
But I mean, there's one. I love it when they do engage with like the dramaturgy of the play as well, and that you're able, like, that they're, when you read a reviewer like Cassie Tung or someone like that, or Ben Neutz, I think as well, that there are brains there that understand how a play is made, and I always find their reading of the play very instructive. Yeah.
Okay, we're coming up to I'm been told I'm welcome to wrap up or keep talking, so I'm going to keep talking for a little bit because I've got a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. Tell me what writers inspire you. Who are you a fan of?
It's often my peers, really. Like, I think someone like Rita Calnier or Lally Katz are writers that really inspire me, especially because when they're friends, you have access to talk to them about their work. So I think writers like that near me are people who I find most inspiring, to be able to have a conversation with them about, what has led to their choices. Tell me about some of your favourite moments in the theatre. I know for me, it was when I saw Cloud Street and the back of that container terminal opened up and Dan Wiley ran out and jumped off the edge of the wharf into the harbour. That was, for me, like probably my favourite moment in theatre thus far, but I've got lots. Can you give me one or two of yours? I think they're probably the work of Barry Kosky. Anytime I've seen anything that Kosky has directed, one that stays in my mind is the Seneca's Oedipus he did at STC a long time ago now, or the Women of Troy that he did. It's something about the dreamscape of Kosky, the way that he has such respect for the sort of original canon, the sort of the canon that he's directing, but then also a completely new invention. I love that it feels both like anarchy, but also a very controlled experience at the same time. I love that it feels absolutely like something from life, but also something from dream. So yeah, I think that Kosky is the one that's burnt in my brain, particularly for the best use of theatre, the best acknowledgement of its artifice. Have you ever worked with him? And it's so camp. Yeah. Have you ever worked with Kosky? No, just a real fan. Would you like to one day? You might have to go to Berlin. Yeah. All right, one final question for you, Tommy. What is your proudest achievement? Oh my God, I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, look, I'm really proud. I'm very proud that Packer and Sons got on. Like, when I think of both that I'm waiting to get the poster because Belvoir's shut, but I want the poster to be sitting here next to my desk as I work, just because, just for the effort to get that play on. I was going through huge personal tragedy, and that was the thing that got me back to work. And I was worried that after the loss of my husband, that I would not be able to work. And there was a workshop scheduled of that play, and I think it was like 2.5 months or even less after Dane had died. And that was in my calendar, that I felt safe enough at Belvoir with those collaborators to rock up. That experience of making the play was such an encouragement and a sort of reminder of the support networks I have around me, but also it just told me that I could keep on working. And so I think the fact that we got it on will always mean a huge deal to me. I'm proud of that.
Art can really save us, can't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations again. I mean, it's just an incredible achievement, particularly that during that time that you managed to, and it was so well received, and such a brilliant production. All right, my friend.
Thank you.
I'm going to say goodbye to you. I'm going to say thank you so much. That was a really fun chat. I hope everybody watching at home enjoyed it as well. And I wish everybody well at this crazy time. Stay strong, stay safe, stay inside, keep making art. Bye-bye.
Lovely to chat to you, Helen. Thank you so much. And thanks, Nida. Thank you for hosting this.
Thank you, Nida. Bye, Tommy.
Bye.